500,000 square miles of ocean. A triangle drawn between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. For almost 60 years, this patch of the Atlantic has carried a reputation as one of the most dangerous and mysterious places on Earth. Ships vanish without a trace. Planes disappear mid-flight with no wreckage ever found. Compasses spin wildly. Some say it's a portal. Some say it's Atlantis. Some say it's aliens. But here's the question almost no one actually asks. What do the numbers say? Not the legends. Not the documentaries with ominous music. The actual records. The insurance data. The aviation safety reports. The shipping logs. Let's go find out. To understand how this legend started, you have to go back further than most people think. Christopher Columbus sailed through these waters in 1492 on his way to what would become one of the most consequential voyages in history. And according to his own logs, something strange happened. His compass needle didn't point exactly where he expected it to, and one night his crew reported seeing a strange light flickering on the horizon. Neither of these things is mysterious to us today. Columbus was experiencing what's called magnetic declination, the difference between true north and magnetic north. As it happens, the Bermuda Triangle sits on one of only two places on the planet where true north and magnetic north line up almost perfectly. This is called an agonic line. For a sailor in 1492 who didn't fully understand this, watching a compass behave slightly differently than expected in a brand new part of the ocean would feel eerie. For a modern navigator who knows to account for it, it's a Tuesday. The strange light is harder to pin down, but the leading explanations are mundane too. A meteor, bioluminescent plankton disturbed by waves, a fire on a distant, unseen island. None of these require anything beyond what we already know about the natural world. Then in 1609, a ship called the Sea Venture, sailing toward the new colony of Jamestown in Virginia, got caught in a hurricane and ran aground on the reefs of Bermuda. The crew survived. They spent months on the island, which at the time was uninhabited, and eventually built new ships and continued their journey. When they got back to England, their story of being shipwrecked on a mysterious island became famous. It's widely believed to have inspired Shakespeare's play The Tempest. So even 400 years ago, Bermuda already had a reputation. Not as a deadly void, but as an enchanted, strange place where ships ran into trouble. That seed, planted in the 1600s, is part of the soil this entire legend grew out of. Now let's fast forward to the cases that actually built the modern myth. In 1881, a story began circulating about a ship called the Ellen Austin. According to the tale, the Ellen Austin came across a derelict ship floating with no crew aboard. They put some of their own sailors on it as a prize crew to sail it back to port. And then, that ship vanished too, taking the prize crew with it. It's a great story. It's also one that modern researchers have had enormous difficulty finding any solid documentation for. The details shift depending on who's telling it. The dates don't line up consistently across versions. This looks like a story that grew in the retelling, the way campfire stories do, until it became part of the established Bermuda Triangle canon, even though its foundation is shaky at best. Compare that to the USS Cyclops in 1918. This one is real, and it's genuinely unsolved, but for reasons that have nothing to do with the paranormal. The Cyclops was a U.S. Navy collier, a ship that carried coal and ore with 306 people aboard. It left port, and it never arrived at its destination. No wreckage, no debris field, no distress call. To this day, it remains the single largest loss of life in U.S. Navy history outside of combat. So what happened? The leading theory points to the ship's cargo. The Cyclops was carrying a heavy load of manganese ore, and there's evidence it may have been overloaded. Combine an overloaded ship with a severe storm, and you get a scenario where the ship could have broken apart and sunk extremely quickly in deep water with no time to send a distress signal and no survivors to tell the story. Is that definitively what happened? No, we don't have the wreck. We may never have the wreck, but definitely don't know is very different from therefore it must be supernatural. A genuine mystery exists here. It's just a mystery of the kind that happens in deep, stormy oceans everywhere, not a mystery unique to this triangle of water. And then there's the case that more than any other cemented the Bermuda Triangle in popular imagination. Flight 19 in December 1945. 5 Navy Avenger torpedo bombers took off from Fort Lauderdale on a routine training exercise. They were supposed to fly out over the ocean, perform some maneuvers, and come back. They never came back. This case has been investigated more thoroughly than almost any other aviation incident of its era, and the picture that emerges is sad, but not mysterious. The flight leader, an experienced pilot, appears to have become disoriented. His compass may have malfunctioned, and radio transmissions recorded that day show him expressing confusion about his location, believing he was somewhere he wasn't. As the flight continued searching for land, the weather worsened and night fell. With fuel running out over open ocean, in the dark, in deteriorating weather, the outcome became almost inevitable. A rescue plane, a PBM Mariner, was sent out to search for them. That plane also disappeared. And here's the detail that often gets left out of the spooky retellings. That specific type of aircraft, the PBM Mariner, had a known and documented problem with fuel vapor buildup that could cause mid-air explosions. A nearby tanker ship reported seeing an explosion in the sky at the right time and in the right location, consistent with exactly that kind of failure. So you have a navigational error, compounded by bad weather, compounded by a separate aircraft with a known mechanical hazard. 3 explainable events stacked on top of each other on the same night. That's not a portal. That's a chain of very human, very ordinary failures that happen to occur together. Now, let's talk about the theories, because there's a huge range here, and they are not all equal. On one end, you have things like Atlantis. The idea that an ancient, advanced civilization sank beneath the waves somewhere in this region, and its ruins are somehow interfering with ships and planes. The problem is that the entire concept of Atlantis comes from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. And most scholars who study his work believe he invented Atlantis as a philosophical story, a thought experiment about pride and downfall, not a real place he was reporting on. There's no archaeological evidence of an advanced sunken civilization anywhere in this region. None. Alien abduction and interdimensional portals fall into the same category. They're fun to think about. They make for great television, but they're not falsifiable. There's no experiment you could run, no data you could collect that would prove or disprove them. That puts them outside of science entirely, no matter how many times they get repeated. On the other end of the spectrum, you have explanations that are genuinely scientific, even if they're less exciting. The Gulf Stream runs directly through this region. It's one of the fastest ocean currents on Earth, and it's also turbulent and unpredictable at its edges. If a small boat goes down in the Gulf Stream, the current can carry debris and wreckage hundreds of miles away within just a day or two. Search teams looking in the area where a ship was last seen might be looking in completely the wrong place by the time they arrive, simply because the water itself has moved everything. Rogue waves are real, documented, and terrifying. These are waves that can reach heights of 30 meters or more, appearing suddenly in conditions that otherwise seem normal. A rogue wave can capsize or swamp a vessel with essentially no warning. They're not unique to the Bermuda Triangle, but the triangle's weather patterns and ocean depth profile make them a real risk here, as they are in many parts of the world's oceans. And then there's methane. The seafloor in parts of this region contains methane hydrates, frozen deposits of gas. In laboratory models, researchers have shown that if a large pocket of this gas were released suddenly, it could reduce the density of the water above it dramatically, theoretically causing a ship to lose buoyancy and sink rapidly, almost like the water turning to foam beneath it. This is a fascinating and legitimate area of geological research. But here's the honest caveat. This has been demonstrated in models and small-scale experiments. It has never been directly observed causing an actual shipwreck in this region. It remains a hypothesis, not a documented cause. So where does all of this leave us? This is where the data becomes the most important part of the story. Because organizations like Lloyd's of London, the insurance market that has tracked maritime losses for centuries, and the US Coast Guard have both looked at this question directly, and their conclusion is consistent. The Bermuda Triangle does not show a higher rate of unexplained disappearances than any other well-traveled stretch of ocean of similar size. That word, rate, is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Because the Bermuda Triangle is one of the busiest regions on the planet for both shipping and small aircraft. It sits between the US East Coast, the Caribbean, and routes toward Europe. Huge volumes of cargo ships pass through here every year. And it has an enormous amount of small private boat and small private plane traffic flying between Florida, the Bahamas, and Bermuda. Small private aircraft and small private boats have higher accident rates than commercial airliners and large cargo ships everywhere in the world. That's not a Bermuda Triangle phenomenon. That's just true of small private vehicles versus large commercial ones, full stop. So when you have a region with heavy small craft traffic, heavy weather, a hurricane-prone climate, and one of the strongest ocean currents on Earth, you are going to get incidents. More incidents in raw numbers, just because more vehicles are passing through. The National Transportation Safety Board's accident records for this area show the same top causes you'd find anywhere else: pilot error, fuel mismanagement, weather, mechanical failure. The same 4 culprits that show up in aviation accident reports from Kansas to Kazakhstan. The Bermuda Triangle isn't a graveyard with its own physics. It's a normal, if unusually busy and unusually stormy, patch of ocean, where the same kinds of accidents that happen everywhere else happen here too, and then get filtered through almost 60 years of magazine articles, documentaries, and campfire retellings that link them together into something that feels like a pattern. Columbus's compass, the Sea Venture's wreck, the Cyclops vanishing into a storm, Flight 19's tragic chain of errors. Each one of these is a real event with a real, mostly explainable cause. What connects them isn't the ocean beneath them, It's the story we decided to tell about them, decades and centuries apart, stitched together after the fact. Lift the curse, and what's left is the ocean. Busy, beautiful, occasionally violent, and entirely fabulously unremarkable.